Hey everyone, and welcome to the Ballet Beyond Podcast, where we interview current and former professionals, teachers, patrons, and more from the world of ballet and dance. You'll get insight from top dancers and instructors in the industry, as well as local performers and educators, as they talk about their experiences in the business. I'm your host today, Pete Commander. If you're from the greater Baltimore area, don't forget to check out CHARM City Ballet, located in Cockeysville, where we offer classes for all dancers ages 3 through adult. Visit www.charmcityballet.com for more information on classes, auditions, and upcoming performances. This is episode 5 of Ballet and Beyond, and we're excited for today's guest, former Dayton Ballet principal Annalise Bodamer. Annalise began dancing at 6 years old and later graduated from Goucher College with honors in dance performance and a minor in mathematics. After first performing as a principal with Boulder Ballet in Colorado, she joined Dayton Ballet as a principal where she performed for 8 seasons. She is currently the artistic director at Contemporary Ballet Academy. All right, Annalise, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start by talking about your decision to go to Goucher, specifically to join a college dance program rather than auditioning right out of high school, and the factors that went into that decision.
Sure. I think that every dancer out there sort of has their own path, whether it's going to take them to a professional career or just continue their training. For me, I was always really invested in academics growing up, and my biggest fear, honestly, was that if I jumped right into the professional world, that I would get burnt out early on. So my biggest decision from high school was actually deciding if I wanted to go to a conservatory type setting or a more liberal education college area. So I actually ended up doing a lot of research, looking up different schools, finding various dance programs that interested me. And for someone who really wanted to focus on ballet, that narrowed down furthermore what schools would provide what I was looking for in my training. And then the third factor was finding a school that would allow me to do both academics in a very rigorous way and also dance training in a rigorous way. I happened upon Goucher in some book that was, I think it was called 10 Colleges That Change Lives or something like this. And it really boasted that the program allowed for people to pursue multiple paths at the same time, saying that especially a lot of the dance majors still did other focuses as well, which really piqued my interest. My final decision for schools actually came between Boston Conservatory and Goucher. And I visited both, auditioned at both. And I love Boston as the city, so that was a big draw for me.
Okay.
And also they have amazing faculty there. They have a great program that, you really do full day training. So it's like dance summer camp all day for your college experience. But then when I visited Goucher, I also kind of fell in love with the feeling of it. And anyone who I talk to who's interested in going to do some sort of dance at college, or even just thinking about taking the university route from high school, I always give them the advice to actually visit the school, because you get such a different sense of a place when you're actually there and you're able to picture yourself there, or, like meeting the faculty are those people that you want to learn from, because that's who's going to be guiding you through your years there. So when I actually visited, even other students that were there auditioning, it just felt like the right connection for me. The size of the school for the type of focus I wanted to have. And then also the other side of it, that they still had the academics required and I would be able to do all of my interests. So I ended up going with Goucher. I was really only able to do that because I got a few scholarships that allowed me to do that financially.
Right.
But that's how I ended up at Goucher.
Okay. And you have a minor in math, right?
Correct. I have my minor in math. I was going to try to double major in both, which is really neat that in one school you would be allowed to do dance and math, because usually a school wouldn't have strong programs in both of those areas, or even allow for a student to have a schedule that would enable them to do that.
Okay.
But I ended up pushing myself really hard. I only graduated in 3 years because I wanted to get out in the dance world and really be a professional ballet dancer. While I was at Goucher, we had a guest artist come in who was the director of Dayton Ballet. His name is Dermot Burke. And he worked with us. He was great. I liked his teaching style. He liked my ambition and brains as a dancer. And so after he left, he actually called my advisor, my dance advisor, saying that someone got injured in their company, and he was wondering if I would come and fill in as a company dancer there. So that was really one of the hardest decisions I had to make, but I think that question had to be asked of me so that I could push myself for the next part of my life. So I decided to say, no, I'm so sorry, I can't take this opportunity, because I really felt if I went at that point in the semester, of my college years, that I didn't know if I would actually come back and finish my degree. And that was a really big goal of mine and important for me just to have in my back pocket as going forth as a professional dancer. So I told him no, which felt really scary.
Right.
And decided that I would really push to finish my degree in 3 years. And I did that. And then the next year actually was a huge economic bomb. I guess that was 2008, 9.
8
what
to
year?
9,
8,
yeah.
Yes, 8 to 9.
Yeah.
And the company that Dermot was the director of actually cut their dancers from 20 to 12 that season.
Okay.
So that was sort of a sign to me saying that I made the right choice, because as a new person coming in, of course, you would be the first to go usually.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I'm glad that I decided to stay, finish out my schooling. And then I auditioned the following year after I graduated, but that was the year that the company was cut. So he didn't have any contracts open for me. So I ended up dancing with Boulder Ballet for a year back in my hometown, which was nice to be, near family again after being across the country for those 3 years at Goucher. But I knew that I wanted more than what I had grown up with. So I went out and re-auditioned, and the following year, Dayton Ballet did have a contract open for a female company dancer. So Dermot offered me the job. He sort of had kept me on his short list over the few years that we had known each other. But I always think for myself in finding a job professionally that it is so important who you know. And it's, there's very, very few percentage of people who are going to go to a cattle call audition and get a job from that if you've never worked with the director, if they don't know your face, if they don't know how you work as a dancer. I think a lot of young aspiring dancers don't necessarily realize it's not what tricks you can do, it's actually how you work and assess their comments and pick up choreography. It's how quick you are in the studio, how professional you can act, if you can step into a role, that you're understudying and be prepared. There's just so many other elements besides just what your arabesque looks like, or if you can do your triple pirouettes on point or whatnot.
It's interesting that you say that too. I've heard a couple people comment that they almost feel like they're cheating if they happen to have an in or if they know somebody. But from what you're saying, it's actually more important to get yourself out there and actually just talk to people, get to know people, have your face in front of people.
Yeah, I think definitely the networking of, them being able to recognize you as a person instead of just one of the masses is really important. And then the more that they have an experience to work with you, like one-on-one as a dancer, gives them more insight into what you could bring to their company. So for like Dermot worked with me for 2 weeks at Goucher, and he was really able to see, what I brought to the table in a real working environment over 6 hours of the day. And that's what really like attracted him to me as an employee.
Okay.
So I think especially these days with YouTube and, everything boasting the tricks of dance, there's so much more that directors are looking for than just a trickster. And having time to show what you can bring to the table beyond high extensions and great jumps, is what makes a company mesh well for a real working environment.
So back to, actually, you had mentioned doing 2 separate auditions for Dayton.
Yes.
Talk about some strategies that you use to prepare for auditioning.
Okay, great question. So auditioning is a very scary and vulnerable thing to do. Not only are you going to a place that you don't know, dancing in front of, other people that are either, if you're at like a big open audition, everyone, for 50 people in the room, there might be one job. It's very cutthroat. Or if you are going to an invited company audition, everyone in the company is watching you.
Right.
So no matter what your audition situation is, it's going to be a little bit nerve-wracking. And I think that, all directors know that's the case going in. And that's the good news, is that most of them were dancers once and they remember that. And a little bit of nerves is good. When you have a performance coming up, it's very natural and normal to have those butterflies in your stomach and a little bit of adrenaline pumping sometimes, ekes out that last pirouette or whatnot. I think the harder things to do are to not clam up. I think when you get into a stressful or tense place, a lot of people sort of like turn into robots and just dance in an enclosed box instead of trying to let your energy stay free. Not only is that going to help your muscles do what they know how to do, but it's also going to put you a step above the students that are just students. Because you don't want to look like a student in an audition. You want to look like a dancer that is reaching a professional level. So the freer that you can sort of stay while maintaining the clarity of your movement, I think, is what will really catch directors' eyes.
So what are do you have to do any like audition oversight in the position that you're in at Contemporary?
Yes, I do. I hold all the auditions.
Okay.
So now I'm on the other side of that table, judging, and it's not in a professional setting. It's just in a school, but all the same principles apply, even if you work with the kids every day, which most of them I see at least 4 times a week, then suddenly you put the word audition in and they all just clam up. So it's very, I have this, I tell them at the beginning of every audition, this is what we do every day. It's just the class. You know us, we know you. But yes, it is it is interesting to be on the other side of the table now.
So you're auditioning students for the school or for performance?
Both. We have what we call a fast track program at Contemporary Dance Academy that is for the students who want to really pursue dance at the pre-professional level. And so we have an audition for that if you want to be part of that program. And then we also audition for all of our main stage productions. So we have a Nutcracker audition. Last year we did Wizard of Oz, just like you guys.
Right.
So we had auditions for that. So there still is definitely, professional expectation about how we want to run the school so that it gives the kids a real sense of what's going on in the real world there.
Okay. So in auditions, what do you look for in a potential student versus a dancer for performance? And where's the overlap between the two?
Mm-hmm. This is just a little bit about me as a dancer, which feeds into what I look for in others. For me, I trained in classical ballet, but the world now, unless you are a prodigy, only classical ballet going to be in Bolshoi 16-year-old, almost every single company out there requires you to have contemporary movement quality.
Okay.
So in dancers of today, I feel it's very important to have an extremely, extremely solid ballet foundation.
Mm-hmm.
But to also have the ability to move and pick up choreography that is more contemporary ballet or contemporary modern styling.
Mm.
Just because that's what's asked of the dancer of today. Times they are changing, and I love contemporary movement myself. I love that style of dance as well. You have to be adaptable as a dancer today to make it. And I think that's really important also. So things that I'm looking for in students are clean, clear technique in the ballet foundation, ability to be able to release that and not feel uncomfortable with new movement. Also, there's this, how should I say this? Everyone has seen a performance when there is some dancer, student or professional, on stage that for whatever reason catches your eye. And it's that X factor or whatever we want to call it. And I think one of the hardest things is to be able to let your inner X factor shine in an audition or in the studio and not just put it on stage. Because as someone that's auditioning, or like as the director, here I sit, how do I know if you can just bring that out on stage if I don't see it here?
Right.
And I think it's a very vulnerable place to be as a dancer, because it's really letting, shedding another layer of yourself to let others in the studio setting feels a little bit more uncomfortable because people are closer to you. There's not, the lights and the costumes that make it easier for you to become that real character. But I really love to see the performance start in the studio, because the more we can bring it out sooner, think of how far then it can land when it comes time for the performance.
Right.
So that's a really big one for me, to sort of see that X factor before the show.
The irony, one of the ironies of you saying this is, and you know this, we've had this conversation, but that you've always been, since school, you've always been one of my favorite dancers to watch. And I think that a big part of that is that you have the ability to sort of let that out even just in class and don't necessarily just reserve it for stage. What, as a performer, what kind of things do you think about or keep in your mind to allow that to be the case?
Let me circle right back to that question.
Okay.
The other element to that is, so I spent, about 10 years dancing professionally before I decided to step away. And in that amount of time, a daily studio life is you're in the studio 6 days a week, anywhere between 6 and 8 hours a day. And the parts of dance that fulfill most people and keep us driving are the times you get to perform and find a new part of yourself, whether it's as an artist or if the dance brings a new part of yourself as a human. So for me, I think that I always did that in the studio, or at least tried to when I was able to, because 95% of the time that you're working isn't on stage. So if you spend all of this time not having those little elements to really like grow and find a new sense of self, then you're only allowed, the one weekend you're on stage once every 6 weeks to be your guiding light sort of thing.
Okay. So
I think that definitely like helped me as a dancer to push myself to do that. Anyway.
So I'm going to keep us on your experience as a dancer for now. You had told us a story about a choreographer you had worked with that during a rehearsal one time, she kept making you repeat over and over and over and telling you that she wasn't getting what she was looking for. Tell that story and sort of talk about your experience of that.
Sure. So this particular choreographer is Gina Patterson, and she is one of my all-time favorite choreographers I have ever worked with. Also, one of the most challenging choreographers I have ever worked with. And I think those things kind of go hand in hand, because when you are pushed to such a limit that you go beyond what you believe your capabilities are, then you come out the other side thinking that was amazing. And just realizing how much you grow from those hard times. This piece was a duet I was working on, and the beginning of the piece is just a woman walking across the stage holding a book in silence. And the whole premise of this duet was about depicting not a dancer, but a human. And one of the hardest things as a trained dancer is to let all of that go and just trust that being a woman and being you as a woman or you as a man is enough for the stage. Because all the other time are mostly, as we're learning rep, we are told to be that trained dancer or present yourself as, here I am, Annalise the ballerina. Here I am, the dancer Annalise. But this choreographer said, nope, you're going to walk across the stage and say, here I am, a woman. And to really release all of those layers in just walking across the stage, we spent at least 45 minutes of me just walking. Sometimes I would get halfway and she would say, no, go back. Sometimes I would get all the way to this bench that was a prop on stage right. I would almost sit down. No, go back. And it was just like inner work happening at the same time, which is also why that piece turned into something so fulfilling to me, because it was beyond just the movement of dancing. It really came to a full place of emotional, soul broadening. It was all the elements that a human has, combined with the dancing that made it so special.
Mm.
And that's where, being able to sort of be vulnerable with new movements and being willing to put hard work in, try it over and over again. You have to be willing to sort of let yourself be in this pick apart place, and we're used to being criticized every day for our dancing. That's part of how you get better. But, this woman, she really picks you apart beyond the outer physical. So it was very intense. I felt myself getting frustrated on the inside, and then I thought, I can't even walk right. How am I going to do this 9-minute duet?
Right.
So it was definitely an experience I will never forget. But in the end, and once we got to the stage, I was able to just strip everything away like she wanted, and just be me on stage. So it was a beautiful outcome to a very difficult rehearsal process.
Mm. Is that something you feel like that most directors like should be able to like take a dancer to a point that they break them through that wall?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it takes a very particular person to be able to join all of those elements of dance into one. I've worked with several choreographers, and I think probably maybe two have been able to do that. So it's not a skill that everyone has. And even choreographically speaking, like, how many pieces have I done that I've danced, sure, but have they fulfilled me in any other way? No. So, there's, I think in anyone's career, there's, the handful of pieces you can count on that really brought something to you more as a human, as an artist, rather than just being physical movement. But I do not think that all directors have that capability.
So let's switch and talk about you and your directing right now. Tell us a little bit about the role you played this past year and how that's going to change in the coming season.
Okay, sure. So last May, I retired from Dayton Ballet, literally having no idea what my future held. And I think for a lot of professional dancers, it's a really scary time and a really scary decision to make, saying, I'm stepping away from this life that I've worked for since I was 6 years old. I actually saw this job as a ballet director at a school in Fort Collins come up on a job search that I did. And within 2 weeks, it was a very quick process. Within 2 weeks, I had the interviews, I did a teaching audition, and I was offered the job.
Wow.
So it was quite a whirlwind of unknowns to a lot of big changes, moving from Ohio to Colorado, starting a new job, teaching a lot. I always knew I liked teaching, but what I really love, only teaching sort of thing. So I took this job as ballet director and sort of fell in love with the kids right away. It's a great studio. I had some really nice talent to work with within the student body. And what was nice is that the owner of the studio, she really gave me a lot of freedoms for what I wanted to teach and the style that I felt would benefit these kids the most.
Okay.
So within this ballet directorship, I basically did a full new Nutcracker just because I, wanted to make some changes and upgrades to what they've been doing in the past. And then I pretty much choreographed all of Wizard of Oz also for our spring show. So for me, it was, yes, I was the ballet director this past year, but I was doing way more than that just because of the product I wanted to put on stage, not only for the students' abilities, but also for the community. You know, and I really enjoyed those parts of it. You know, like sometimes Saturday rehearsals are my favorite day because I can go in and be a little bit more artistic in choreography and, you know, have the rehearsal process, which I always really enjoy, sometimes more than class. Yeah, so that sort of springboarded this promotion to artistic director of the studio, in that the extra work that I did last year sort of showed the studio owner what I was capable of in that arena, and, you know, even more so, you know, I have all these other ideas for this year. So we had a discussion about it, and she was happy to promote me up to artistic director, which is great. I'm also still ballet director since I teach all of the highest levels of that. But yeah, I am excited to, you know, go further into the artistic side of production. And, you know, I spent all day yesterday building nutcracker sets. So, you know, all you students out there, if you think your teachers are off during the summer, we're not. We're already doing things.
Yes.
So,
yes.
yeah.
Do you miss the stage? I guess that's really what I'm at. Do you miss the stage? Do you, like, I know it's only been a year, but do you feel like even now that that's something that's missing, that you would maybe eventually like to find an outlet for?
Great question. So I actually, there's two smaller dance companies near Fort Collins. They're both in Boulder. One of them is Boulder Ballet, and then the other one is a contemporary modern company called Third Law Dance Theater.
Okay.
And I knew them both from growing up, and like I mentioned before, I did dance with Boulder Ballet for 1 year before going to Ohio.
Right.
And they actually asked me to guest with them this year. So I was able to do two different performances. One was a contemporary ballet, and then one was just a modern performance. So I've been really fortunate in that I've still been able to sort of dance and have some performing opportunities instead of just being cut off cold turkey.
Right.
I think for me, the hardest thing, honestly, is that, you know, for these smaller companies, they only rehearse 3 or 4 times a week for a half a day, which is great for them and enables, you know, people to have other jobs, and it allowed me to do it while I was teaching and everything.
Right.
But after experiencing myself as a dancer at my peak, being in the studio 6 days a week, 6 hours a day, the hard thing for me is then dancing when I don't feel like I'm at my best because I'm not training the most.
Right.
And and it's okay. Like, my body, I don't think could train that way anymore, you know. So it's more a question of, like, am I happy putting this product of my dancing on stage when I don't necessarily feel like it's my best technique or I'm in the best shape or things of that nature. I think that the contemporary and modern route is a lot more forgiving in that way, just in the social aspects. And the rest of the company, you know, it's just a different world than the straight ballet studio. And I definitely think that I would love to still perform now after this baby comes.
Right.
And that's part of it too.
Right.
But I think it would be really hard for me to strap on point shoes and pink tights again. Just because of the level of the product I would be able to put out and knowing what I used to be able to do.
All right. Let's move into sort of what's next. Now, as artistic director, what are some of your goals for the school?
That's a good question. I would love to grow our fast track program, to get a little bit bigger. Also, having an older group of girls that all the young ones can really look up to. I would love to just, really have a great role model group up there at the top. I remember growing up through the studio, being totally obsessed with the high level girls. They were the world and everything to you. And I think that a lot of teenagers don't necessarily realize how much of an impact they have on the rest of the studio. And I have a great group of girls right now. I'm not saying that I don't, but I think that is so important to have a strong group of leaders at the top to show, correct respect, etiquette, how to handle yourself in rehearsals, all the things. You learn so much from the top.
Right.
I would love to create a summer performance series. Parents are always wanting to see their kids dance more. So I'd love to have a end of summer session performance, maybe at an outdoor gazebo or something outside, I'm thinking.
Okay.
I would also love to sort of increase our performance numbers, just in the amount of performances we're able to get. And I know a lot of that is for theater rentals and whatnot, but these kids work half a year on Nutcracker and then get their 3 shows in, and that's it. But so that's sort of a dream wish, I guess, if we had the money for it.
Right.
And beyond that, I think it's really just training the kids from, the 9, 10, or even younger than that, the 7, 8-year-olds, to really create a solid foundation so that by the time they get to me, like I have a great foundation to really ricochet forward into the future. And that takes time to sort of set up, the training for each level, what I would expect for each level to be accomplishing, and, finding the right instructors for those younger levels so that it really is the base of what comes to the high fast track.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because we've talked to plenty of parents who will say something like, well, it doesn't matter that her teacher isn't very good because she's only 3 or 6 or 10 and she might not even dance when she's older. But what you're saying is that it absolutely matters. Definitely.
Yep, because the sooner you can create the good patterns, the easier it will be to stack on all of the next levels of technique, opposed to having to strip down with all the bad habits once someone comes to you and then rebuild. It's just like building a house. If you have a good foundation, then you can add all the frills onto it. But if you try to put the frills on top of something crumbling, it's just a disaster.
Thanks so much to Annalise for being with us on Ballet and Beyond. For more information about Contemporary Dance Academy, located in Fort Collins, Colorado, visit contemporarydanceacademy.com. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and give Ballet and Beyond a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. For questions and guest requests, please email us at balletandbeyondpodcast@gmail.com. I'm your host, Pete Commander. Thanks for listening.